I have this and one more video to make on Martin Chuzzlewit. The one I'm going to talk about right now is Charles Dickens and America. So Martin Chuzzlewit came out in the early 1840s, and Dickens was working on this while he was making basically a book tour, or just an author's tour, lecture tour in America. He had had a large and growing reader population in the U.S., and Old Curiosity Shop was infamously a big hit in America. So what happened on this trip? Two books kind of come out of this. One was, I think, American Notes. I could be wrong about that. I've not really read any of the nonfiction by Dickens. I will get to that eventually, I guess. I prefer his novels. And also there's an American, what I call American episodes in Martin Chuzzlewit. And they are a bit tiresome. Now, I just want to mention a couple things with regards to these American episodes. Some of them are very, very funny, and I would say the stuff that Dickens focuses on that happens to the young Martin Chuzzlewit in America, that it had to have happened to Charles Dickens just because of the particularity. The interaction with the press in New York City, that was very funny. An interaction with a hoity-toity abolitionist family who was, I believe, from Boston. I don't remember all the details because I don't care. All of the people chewing tobacco, even some women, and spittoons everywhere. Some of that was funny. He had some sharp things to say about slavery, and well-deserved. Some of it was, it was okay, but at, the fifth, sixth person who, spits in the spittoon and then asks young Martin Chuzzlewit, what do you think of our country? Again, this must have happened to Charles Dickens. It gets a bit tiresome, but the other thing is, it's like all nasty. And given that Dickens wasn't from America, this does not come across very well. The thing is, Charles Dickens can have a character like Mrs. Gamp, the alcoholic nurse, and he's very cutting, but he also gives her a human side, and you don't see that so much in the American episodes. So that's not really fair. The other thing is he's an outsider, so it's different when Mark Twain makes similar critiques 30, 40 years later after this, versus someone who's coming from England. And the other thing to remember is that Dickens did very well in describing London and the kinds of people he ran into London, even the urban poor, but he wasn't so good with regards to the countryside of England, though he always wanted to believe he was from the countryside. Okay, but one of the reasons that he added the American episode, other than he did have to send Martin somewhere, but he didn't have to go to America. That said, it wasn't a bad idea in terms of plot, in that Martin really had to learn very hard to get out of his pride. And he kept thinking, I'm going to be a success, blah, 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 and not valuing people around him, denigrating people around him that didn't deserve it. So that was fair. But the other reason was making fun of Americans was kind of a little literary business in England at the time. Anthony Trollope's mother evidently went to, I don't know if it was Ohio or wherever it was, because the thing was, for Brits, you're not doing too well, you want to get rich, so go to America, start some kind of business in America, and you'll get rich. That would be like telling people, go out to Silicon Valley, do a startup, and you'll get rich. Of course, most people don't end up rich. And Mrs. Trollope did not. And she wrote some kind of nonfiction book that was just like the domestic habits of the Americans, something like that. And it was a bestseller in England. Probably not so much in America, but she wasn't writing for that audience. So I believe that Martin Chuzzlewit wasn't doing as well sales-wise as had been Old Curiosity Shop and the other, and Barnaby Rudge was a stinker too, as I mentioned before. So it could be that Dickens thought, I'm getting stinkers, I really have to beef up sales, and this is how I'm going to do it. He got his mojo back with the next book, Dombey and Son, and probably because he kills off a little kid in that, just like Old Curiosity Shop. Great Dickens. But there was another thing going on. The problem Dickens had was there was no international copyright law. He was being ripped off in America. He had a very contentious relationship with the American press because what was happening is those newspapers and magazines in America were republishing his novels as they were coming out, unauthorized, not paying him any money. He got paid nothing. He was being pirated, but it was all legal because there was no international copyright. He did not have copyright in the U.S. So he was kind of sore, and part of his lecture tour was him lobbying for international copyright. And of course, the American press, who were making nice money pirating other people's material, didn't like this, so they were very critical of him when he was going around the U.S. As I said, it was in the 1840s, so this is a couple decades before the U.S. Civil War as well. The U.S. wasn't terribly developed socially, and that's true. And then, of course, the big stain, the big sin of slavery looked really bad to the European audience. And one of the things that it keeps coming back to, and you see this in the book, is all the American characters, again, ask young Martin Chuzzlewit, what does he think of America? And Martin is smart enough, though I think he loses his patience at one point and really says what he thinks. I mean, he is young, and he's kind of a hothead. But you get that insecurity on the part of Americans, but also everyone is like the most remarkable man in the country. And we're the greatest. I mean, this is, Trump is all American in that respect of boasting. And boasting has been an American thing since very early in the history, evidently. And of course, that rubbed all the Europeans the wrong way, especially, what kind of culture do these guys have? Yeah, they may be growing, but they're just a bunch of yokels, right? Well, of course, 100 years later, America would be the superpower coming with the Soviet Union in World War II. So, who has the last laugh? Well, history's not over yet. So I wanted to close this out with what Dickens wrote later. And if you read Martin Chuzzlewit, you can just skip the American things. Just, find a summary of what happened in the plot because it does get a bit tiresome. Some of it was funny. I was listening on an audiobook at, advanced speed, so it went over quickly. And it wasn't as many parts in America as I had thought, but, it does get a bit tiresome, the critiques. However, Dickens went back, and this was a couple years before he died, to do another tour. He needed the money. I'm not getting into that right now, probably when I get to the books he was writing at the time. So this was post-Civil War, so a lot of things had changed, and if I remember correctly, there was international copyright by that point. So most of what he had critiqued America about in the early 1840s had gotten fixed from his point of view. So he wrote a postscript to the novel that is supposed to be published every time Martin Chuzzlewit is republished. So here we go, and I'm going to read it, and that will be it. At a public dinner given to me on Saturday, the 18th of April, 1868, in the city of New York, by 200 representatives of the press of the United States of America, I made the following observations, among others. So much of my voice has lately been heard in the land, that I might have been contented with troubling you no further from my present standing point, were it not a duty with which I henceforth charge myself, not only here, but on every suitable occasion, whatsoever and wheresoever, to express my high and grateful sense of my second reception in America, and to bear my honest testimony to the national generosity and magnanimity. Also to declare how astounded I have been by the amazing changes I have seen around me on every side, changes moral, changes physical, changes in the amount of land subdued and people, changes in the rise of vast new cities, changes in the growth of older cities almost out of recognition, changes in the graces and amenities of life, changes in the press, without whose advancement no advancement can take place anywhere. Nice ass kissing there. Nor am I, believe me, so arrogant as to suppose that in 5 and 20 years there have been no changes in me, and that I had nothing to learn and no extreme impressions to correct when I was here first. And this brings me to a point on which I have, ever since I landed in the United States last November, observed a strict silence, though sometimes tempted to break it, but in reference to which I will, with your good leave, take you into my confidence now. Even the press, being human, may be sometimes mistaken or misinformed. And I rather think that I have, in 1 or 2 rare instances, observed its information to be not strictly accurate with reference to myself. Fake news. Indeed, I have, now and again, been more surprised by printed news that I have read of myself than by any printed news that I have ever read in my present state of existence. Thus, the vigor and perseverance with which I have for some months past been collecting materials for and hammering away at a new book on America has much astonished me. Seeing that all that time my declaration has been perfectly well known to my publishers on both sides of the Atlantic, that no consideration on earth will induce me to write one. But what I have intended, what I have resolved upon, and this is the confidence I seek to place in you, is on my return to England, in my own person, in my own journal, so he had some magazines himself, to bear, for the behoof of my countrymen, such testimony to the gigantic changes in this country as I have hinted at tonight. Also to record that wherever I have been, in the smallest places equally with the largest, I have been received with unsurpassable politeness, delicacy, sweet temper, hospitality, consideration, and with unsurpassable respect for the privacy daily enforced upon me by the nature of my avocation here and the state of my health. Again, he was 2 years away from death. This testimony, so long as I live, and so long as my descendants have any legal right in my books, I shall cause to be republished as an appendix to every copy of those 2 books of mine in which I have referred to America. And this I will do and cause to be done, not in mere love and thankfulness, but because I regard it as an act of plain justice and honor. I said these words with the greatest earnestness that I could lay upon them, and I repeat them in print here with equal earnestness. So long as this book shall last, that's Martin Chuzzlewit, I hope that they will form a part of it and will be fairly read as inseparable from my experiences and impressions of America. Charles Dickens, May 1868. And it is important to read the prefaces and the other notes that Dickens has appended to his novels when they got republished many years later. He rethought some things, and of course, England itself was undergoing a lot of change in the period. It was totally industrialized by the time he died. There was still some pastoral, as it were, in his youth, in his 20s, but it was pretty much gone by the time he died. And there were some other aspects, which we will return to another time. As I said, this was it for America and Dickens. The last thing I want to talk about on Martin Chuzzlewit is the fraudulent life insurance company, and that will be the next video.